and listen to Hammond. And, he's running for governor, and we're all interested in what his platform is and how he's going to go with government and that, what he proposes. This is question and answer, so all of you please come with lots of questions. I'm sure Hammond enjoys doing that, is being able to field the questions for everybody who's going to be voting in Idaho. Okay. And right now, my wife had put this together, and she's going to say a prayer before we start.
Awesome.
Okay?
Thank you guys for coming. Just briefly, the big reason why I'm doing this is I went to the Capitol 2 years ago because our representatives let our electoral votes go, and I thought, oh, they'll fix it. And I realized nobody's going to fix it. The people need to rise up and get educated and learn about what's wrong in our country, and there's a lot of problems and they're being hidden. But you know what? If you research, you can find, and I'm sure that's why all you people are here. You're well aware of all of that. So I'll just open up a prayer and let Ammon begin. So I'll just lift up our hands to our Heavenly Father, the Almighty Lord God, and we just thank you so much for this fellowship and these people, Lord, coming together. And we just invite the Holy Spirit here as we go through this, and everyone listens with ears and discernment. And I just ask for protection around Ammon and his family and Wendy and his whole campaign, Lord. This man has sacrificed, and I respect him because he has no fear, at least from what I can tell. And you know what? We're not supposed to fear anything. We are only supposed to hold you in awe, Lord, and I see this man doing it, and so I really want to get to know him. We need to turn Idaho around. Idaho is not what I thought it was. We have been infiltrated, I do believe. It's my opinion, Lord, and just forgive me if I'm wrong, but just bless this time. Bless Ammon, give him the right words and the wisdom that he needs to get his message out and to get support around him. If it is your will, Lord, that he be governor, and if it is your will, Lord, we just thank you. We trust in you always. Pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right, well, thank you for having me. I may go through some of this stuff here, or maybe we'll just have a conversation. So, I have lived in Idaho for 7 years now. Well, June would be 7 years. I live in Emmett, Idaho. I have 6 children with my wife, Lisa. My youngest, you see him running around, Elias. And he just turned 7. And my oldest is 19. She got married in September. And so they're living in Moscow trying to not become liberals. He's going to school up there, be an engineer. And anyway, they're doing well. But it kind of gives me a perspective that's a little different because I see, them starting off and some of the things that they need that are going to be difficult for them because of the circumstances that we're in now. We'll talk hopefully a little bit about those. I grew up on a ranch in southern Nevada. Some of you may know about it and some of you may not, I feel like that was a great privilege to grow up on the way I grew up. I was very free, able to, pretty much do whatever we wanted to do and needed to do in order to, run the ranch. We worked hard. It was just a way of life. I worked very, very hard at a very young age, and I didn't know any different. I thought it was that's the way it was. And I feel very privileged to be able to be raised the way I was. And then some of it, again, I'll just kind of go through this. I might go through the presentation with you, but I think I'll just summarize and then we'll talk, and then I'll use kind of some of the stuff I have as to answer questions and so forth. So we're not here for a long time because I have lots of material and I could take up your time. I could take up hours of your time showing what some of the things that are happening in Idaho. But I'll just kind of go through a little bit about me first and why I'm running and what's happening in Idaho. So I moved to Idaho again in 2015, and it was about a year after the federal government came after my family. 2014 was an interesting year for my family, and I actually wasn't living on the ranch. I had, at a young age, actually left the ranch and started my own business and moved to Arizona, and that business was a fleet maintenance business where I contracted with commercial truck fleets, and I took care of their entire, their fleet. I did all the maintenance, I tracked all the maintenance, did all the repairs, everything that was required for DOTs, and we even had a paint and body division, and we had a bodyworks division where we, if they needed equipment installed on the trucks and so forth, and so we pretty much took care of if they had a commercial truck, that's what, and it was mostly local, it wasn't like over the road trucks. Mostly local, like one of my largest customers was Praxair, Air Gas. I don't know if you're familiar with them. I kind of got into that industry, and so I did a lot of liftgate work, and there was a lot of pumps and tanks and things that we did. And I built one of the largest private fleet maintenance companies in Arizona. And I have employed hundreds of people and dealt with millions of dollars of budgets, and I started that business from scratch. I was 21 years old, and I said I was going to get in business for myself. I didn't really even know what I was getting into. I didn't even understand the industry. I just had some knowledge about, I was a good welder, and I understood some, the basics about mechanics. I didn't know a whole lot about heavy trucks, but and then it wasn't very long that we were the leading fleet maintenance provider in Arizona. And so just know I do have an entrepreneurial background. It's something that I love, and I've started multiple businesses before. I've started little businesses, spin-off businesses, and I've sold them. And then I started, my fleet maintenance business, and I ran that for 21 years, and then I sold it. But before I sold it, I also got into software. And people say, oh, you got a tech background. Yeah, I do actually have a tech background. But it was because of that industry and the lack of software for that industry. And so I saw, I hunted, actually when I first got in business, I was looking for a software that would track the maintenance and do the things that I needed, and I couldn't find one. So I actually, clear back, and this would have been in 97, I actually started building software in a DOS program. Yeah, in DOS. So that tells you, clear back then, I was, leading the industry, or trying to lead the industry actually, in technology. But I ran out of resources, and I was not able to finish that project. And so it took me several years, like almost 10 years, to start to pick it back up again. And by then I had, the resources and the manpower and the finances to be able to build the software, because there just wasn't anything out there in this industry doing what it needed to do. So it took me about 3.5 years, and I had a really good team. I had developers and project managers, and we built a team. And because I had my shop and I had a good reputation, and we were able to use our vendors as guinea pigs, our customers as guinea pigs, and our technicians and office staff, and we built this really amazing software. And it made a huge difference in our shop and just how we run it, and it just automated all the processes that we had proven to work in our shop, but we were able to automate it completely wireless. Everybody was working on tablets. We were, automatic estimation, automatic parts ordering, and it was a really amazing software. And it worked so well that we decided, well, why don't we sell it to other shops? So we began selling to other shops, and now it's one of the leading fleet maintenance shop management softwares in North America. So again, I just give you a little bit of background. I did grow up on a ranch. It was a great privilege to grow up on a ranch, and I could never replace those experiences, but I was able to also take those ethics of hard work and making things happen and so forth, and apply them in business, and take, a whole bunch of people, all different types of people, different backgrounds, different education levels, and bring them together and actually produce a product for someone to benefit from. And I hope that some of these things will help people have confidence in voting for me as a governor, because I believe those very same skills are needed, and we need some practicality in our governments of actually, putting things together that actually make sense, that actually can produce a good result for the benefit of others. And so that's a little bit about my background. And then about the time that life was really, really good for me. And when I say that, I mean, I've had a lot of good moments in my life that have been really good, but this was one where I felt like I had everything together, kind of. I had, my family was doing well. I was, serving in my church, and I had, a whole slew of kids, but we were all healthy and happy. I had a good home for them and a good life for them. And it was the first time that I also had both time and money. Because usually when you have money, you don't have time, and when you have time, you don't have money. Unless you're retired, but maybe somehow those things come together, right? Right? So, but this was, a time of my life where I actually had some success, and I had my business running where it was functioning really well with the right people, and so I had a little extra time. And as you know, God doesn't like you to be idle. So it was right around that moment, right around that time in period of my life, that the federal government came after my father's ranch. And to sum up a whole bunch of, and I'll answer any questions you want about that, but to kind of just package it up into a little understandable package. Ultimately, what happened was the federal government wanted to make an environmentalist, endangered species mitigation area for the desert tortoise out of my father's ranch and the other ranches around. It started by Harry Reid making a deal with the Chinese corporation to put in the largest solar plant in the world, solar farm in the world. Well, the environmentalists, because of course they're all part of what's going on in the federal government and so forth. Well, they wanted all the wildlife that was in that, that was going to be affected by the solar farm. They wanted them to have a new home, especially the desert tortoise. Well, they didn't like my dad anyway, and the other ranchers in that area, and so they decided that they would make the Bundy Ranch the mitigation area for the wildlife. And the idea was that they would move all the wildlife over to our ranch, which is 70 miles from where the solar farm was going to be. And so they came in and just notified my father and other ranchers that they were no longer allowed to ranch there. The problem is my dad has 11 grazing rights deeded with the state of Nevada. And he's like, wait a minute, you don't have authority to do this. These are my rights. They've been in my family for 5 generations, since 1877. And those deeds, some of those deeds originate back to 1950s, and they were first deeded with the state of Nevada in did I say 1950? Yeah. 1850, excuse me, thank you. 1850, and they were deeded with the state of Nevada as early as 1890, because that was the first period of time in which the state even had a way to register those water and grazing rights. And so, my dad's in this dispute saying they're private property, they belong to me. And the federal government saying, well, we're claiming all the land, therefore we're saying that you can't be here. And that's the dispute that went on for, for almost 2 decades. And my dad just continued to ranch. My dad was not going to yield his rights. He was the last one out of 53 in that area. All the rest of them were driven out, or they tried to comply and tried to do the things that they wanted, and it ultimately put them completely out of business. My dad was the last one. There was one other rancher, but he passed away and left my dad the last rancher. That's why they say my dad's the last rancher standing, even though we know that there's other ranchers, but in that area, in fact, the whole Mojave Desert, he is the last rancher standing. And he's the last rancher that is ranching on his original rights. So, anyway, ultimately what happened is the Obama administration,
Always comes up.
understanding the situation, and looking at it as like, here's the last man that's in the way of doing what we want to do here. And so he felt he had enough political power, and he also felt that he had enough of a military type force to be able to go down and to basically destroy my father's ranch and do whatever they wanted with it. And so they did. They sent an army of federal agents of 213 men, and it was like the ranch they came and locked the ranch down, put snipers on the hills. They locked the entire access to the ranch up with guards on each access point, and they began to patrol the area with M-ramps, and then they began to use helicopters to kill the cattle and drive the cattle, and leaving the baby calves out in the desert to die. They began to just bury the cattle in mass graves and so forth. And then, it took us a little while, because, we're just a little ranching family. At this point, I come back up to help and to be with my family. This is when life was really good, and I come back up, and I get thrown in this. And I mean, I hadn't made a living or lived on the ranch for, quite some time, but I knew and felt that I needed to stand with my dad. And actually, when I drove up to the ranch that very first time to do that, I told myself that cows in the desert aren't worth losing our life over. However, when I drove down into the valley and saw what I saw, it was no longer about cows in the desert. It was about the liberty and freedom of everybody in this country. And it became very real to me, and it became, something that it opened my eyes and realized that, look, the freedom is not going to live for another generation with this type of action happening. And so it became something that was much different than just cows in the desert. And but we were just a ranching family when we didn't know what to do and how to act and how to respond to such a force. In fact, they did say that if we resisted in any way, that this would be another Waco or Ruby Ridge. And that was the BLM liaison that actually was communicating with my family. And so that was their threats. That's what they, what their intent was. But about, a few days into it, we started getting enough people that we felt a little brave, like 30 or 40 people during the day, and then more people would come in the evening after work and so forth, to just kind of stand with us while we just watched this destruction go around us, and we couldn't do anything. And again, make a long story short, we began to kind of demonstrate, protest a little bit as they would come onto the road and off the road. And the first couple times they kind of ignored us, but then on Wednesday they had made a plan, and we know now because we have all the documents from our court case and so forth. But they actually planned to instigate and to confront us, and they were actually even training their dogs to attack people that were saying things like "go home" and that type of stuff. And we have those videos. And so they did. They stopped and they got out and they began to, basically confront us. They sicked their dogs on us. They body slammed my Aunt Margaret. She was a 57-year-old woman, just body slammed her to the ground. And then sicked their dogs on my sister. She was pregnant. They sicked the dogs on me. And then they also, began to tase me, they tased me multiple times. And I felt the strength of the Lord protect me. I felt very, very sustained, and we were able to stand there and literally right in the middle of all of this, stand there, you know, kind of against them. And they realized that we were not going to leave. We were not going to be violent, but we were not going to leave. And so they just decided to disengage. And while they drove around us, we just stood in the middle of the road. Well, what happened at that point is those things went viral. They were filmed, they went viral. And people were not okay with what the government was doing, what the government agents were doing. And they came from all over the country, people came from all over. And I'll show you some, just a little bit of a scene here. Ultimately, they came from all over, and they said, no, we're not gonna allow this to happen. And on the Saturday following, several thousand people came, and the people gave these federal agents an ultimatum and that ultimatum was to leave the area immediately. And these federal agents, because of the response of the people, and because there were so many people, and because they had lost the PR battle, they decided that they were going to leave. And they left. Here's a picture of them. I don't know if you can see it, but this is, if you look up here, here's the freeway, and these vehicles are going all the way up to the freeway. So this is only about a third of the vehicles that you see.
So that's the feds leaving?
This is a picture from a federal agent. He took a picture of it. But if you look, it's only about a third of the vehicles, because the rest of it goes all the way up to that hot freeway. And so this is when they were staging. So all the way from the freeway, all the way back, and then all the way back here was vehicles lined up. And that's the type of operation just to remove my father from the ranch.
Wow.
They spent $6 million just on that operation.
Wow.
And
Where'd they find all those people? Just
So-
raw men from-
interesting enough, they did not use any of the local agents, because they would have relationships with anybody, because they knew that, you know, the level of force that they were probably planning on using. So they got them most of them out of Oregon, Washington area, and they pulled them down there, and it was a special operation that they did. And anyway, I'll show you something that you might find interesting here.
So Eamon, where was isn't the sheriff supposed to protect people against the Fed, or is that too complicated a question?
No, not at all. Hang on to that question though, because I want to answer that question, because ultimately the sheriff did come, because there was a standoff that happened, and the people were like, you know, we're not leaving. You have to leave. We're not leaving. You can kill us. You can do whatever you want, but we're not leaving. And then finally, after, you know, years and years of trying to get the sheriff to protect, finally the sheriff deputy, he was the chief deputy, but came in between us and asked the people what they wanted. And, you know, of course, and he's the one that conveyed that message and pretty much ordered the federal officers to leave. And it's pretty amazing. I mean, I'll show you a little bit of this.
Is that the 15 or the 95, or is that
This is the 15. We're right underneath it.
the Mesquite area?
Yeah, it's just past Mesquite, right before you climb on the mesa, up onto the mesa, yeah.
Crowd is now moving forward towards the barrier. The police have been telling everybody they're going to shoot if we don't move back. People are moving forward with their hands in the air, holding flags with both hands in the air. It's a mixture of people on foot, you can see, people on foot, and cowboys.
This is the special agent in charge.
All right, push these people back up out the gate. Push them back up out the gate. We're gonna work to release these cows. Listen to me. I'm gonna work with you. I'm gonna work with you, but I need you to back up.
I understand. What are you doing? You will get downtown.
I know, I get that. Can we push them back up out the gate right now? We're gonna work with you and you. You two come in with me. We're not going to come get arrested. We're not going to murder. We're not going to get arrested. If you want to do that, that's great. You can do that. Just go. Do your thing. We'll make sure that we're not going to need some help if they decide that they're going to pull those pins. But I need, it's only going to be Bundy and his son. That's it.
It's the people.
That's me without a beard. That's my brother right next to me, he looks exactly like me. And I should let it go a little longer. You don't really get it. It does span. You can see that just showing part of them, but it does span over here a little bit. I think if you can see all the other agents.
So was any of these people that came against you, have you ever run across anyone that said, you know
Not that,
what?
oh, that's what I wanted to show you. Okay.
That were kinda didn't like having to do what they had to do?
I mean, that's a good question. Let me answer that, but okay, right here. There's something happens right here that's very interesting. Okay, you see all the federal agents backing up, right? When something happens here, it's kind of amazing. It's almost about ready to happen. Okay, wait a minute. Who is that? So he looks like he's got a badge on, right? You can't see it really good
Is he
in
the
that. It's
sheriff?
a little light. This is a sheriff deputy.
Oh.
And he's just one of them. There was a couple of them down there, including the chief, and they were the ones that were basically telling the federal agents that the people don't want you here, you need to go, and they basically enforced those terms. And anyway, he's standing there, he's not afraid of the people, right? And in fact, if you still look, most of these federal agents still have their guns drawn and still are pointing, even though these deputies are down here. And the point is that the sheriff does have a tremendous amount of power to protect us. So anyway, I mean, I won't get into this much more other than,
Was there any support from other sheriffs in other counties around there?
not really, but we did get some support from some of the other states, like the governor of Utah basically said, you're not bringing the cattle in here, because they had gathered around 400 head of cattle, the ones that they hadn't killed. They killed about 60 head. And anyway, I'll show you a little bit of here, and then I'll get on with this. But
So is our local sheriff, like Ada County Sheriff, do you know if
Yeah,
he's
Nye
a
County?
constitutional sheriff?
so Ada County Sheriff is the previous sheriff. Bartlett was, removed or left because he was giving promotions for sexual favors. And then then they appointed the sheriff that they have right now. I really don't know much about him, but so there's a lot of responsibility that the people in Ada County need to, exercise to put the right sheriff in place. So.
Well, I've been wanting to go visit the sheriff and talk about Sheriff Mack, if there's a group that wanna go with me.
Yep.
Just to see, cause Sheriff Mack will train a lot of sheriffs don't even know what their responsibility is, and so.
Yeah,
And I heard that, isn't Sheriff Mack also under investigation too?
Oh, I haven't heard
I
that.
haven't heard that. I don't know.
For what?
I mean, in all honesty, you put half the state under investigation.
Right,
Yeah.
well, realistically.
If you dial you wanna find a corrupt cop, just dial 911.
Just, I just heard that.
So, I'll just move on here, but ultimately, that's what happened, you know, I mean, that's just a teeny bit of what happened, I could show you videos of a lot of other things that happened, including them shooting cattle from the helicopters and burying them and so forth, but, but the amazing thing is that the people responded, and they corrected the problem, and I experienced that firsthand, and learned something. I learned a lot of things, because a lot of times we believe that our rights are maintained in the courtroom or in the ballot box, and that's not true. There's other things that go on there. There's important things that go on in the courtroom and in the ballot box, but that's not where rights are maintained. Rights are maintained on people, individuals claiming, using, and defending their rights. And other people coming around and assisting each other in claiming, using, defending their rights. And the whole purpose of government is to assist the individual in claiming, using, and defending their rights.
Should we tell them that?
What's that?
Should we tell them?
We should
that?
tell
They
them
seem to
that,
have
but
forgotten.
they forgot. But you know, when you look at breaking down, like especially local government, because that's the closest to the people. You look at a county recorder and where you can go record your deeds and your titles and so forth. Well, what are they doing? They're assisting the individual in claiming their right. And then we have access, right-of-ways, roads, easements, are all to assist a person in using their rights, especially in that case, property rights. And then the government is supposed to be there, such as the county sheriff and so forth, our military, National Guard, all of that, to defend our rights. But they're supposed to assist us in that. The primary responsibility falls upon each individual. And so we do have a problem where we think that we're gonna go and we're gonna maintain our rights and do what we're gonna do, and we're all gonna go vote, and we're all going to, that's what we're gonna do, and then we go back to our lives. And that has never, ever in history been the way in which rights are preserved. Rights are preserved by individuals claiming, using, and defending them. And I learned that during this experience, because the federal government had turned their sights on my family when they were supposed to be the one protecting the states and the people's rights from the outside world. The system that was set up for the states to step in front of the federal government, if they ever do that, was broken down because the states won't go contrary to the federal government because of federal funding. So that was broken down. And the county sheriffs are pretty much the same way. They won't go against the feds because they have, or the state, but mostly the federal government, because they receive so much federal funding. And so it ultimately left my family to have to defend ourselves. And we had to call upon the people of this country to come around us and to do that in order for our rights to be preserved. And that is going to keep happening more and more. We are seeing that right now. The very same thing that happened to my family is what's happening to everybody right now. Because these were our rights, they were very clearly our rights, and the government was saying that they're not a right, they are a privilege. And it's very much like we talk about our body, right? Our body is our right to control, we have the right to decide what we're going to put in it, what we're going to do with it. But the government is saying, no, that's not a right, that is a privilege that we are affording you. And so, which brings me to, and I do want to go through this part, but I'll do it fairly quickly here, and then we'll just open it up to conversation. Because I do want to, can everybody see that enough? Can you see that enough to?
Sure.
Okay. Because Idaho is in a battle for its conservative soul. And a lot of the reason is because of this man right here and his buddies. So some of you that have watched closely, you'll have seen this material before, but you may also know, or not, that Idaho was the first state to arrest people for attending church. They arrested a pastor in Moscow and a couple of church leaders in Moscow for having church outside. And we're also,
in chariots and others trust in horses, but
we're also the first state to arrest a mother for going to the park. And we were one of the first states to have, to raid a business for not shutting down during the COVID lockdown. So this, we're talking about Idaho here. And so, you know, why are the police acting this way? Well, this guy here tells us, and he's the Idaho State Police officer, he's undercover, and he's issuing a citation to this business owner who decided to stay, these business owners who decided to stay open. And he tells us why, and if you listen, he talks quiet, the business owner's kind of loud, so just beware. But listen to why he says he's there.
Real quick, this is from the state.
Would you say that again, sir? Hand him that letter back.
Now,
I would like to hear him identify himself again.
I'm Jake Schwecken with the Idaho State Police. I'm just delivering this letter in response to you guys opening it, in contrast to the stay-at-home order.
Okay, so did you hear that? Yeah. Says in contrast to you're the stay-at-home order you've opened, and I'm issuing this letter from Idaho State Police. And so, you know, he makes it very clear why he's doing that. But we have to ask the question, I think, you know, that, again, what are these officers doing? Because in this case, and in the others as well, I thought that this activity was protected by the Constitution, right? Is it not protected by the Constitution? I mean, the First Amendment says, Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So it's off limits.
Right.
The government does not have the authority. And then we go to the Idaho State Constitution and Section 4, which is titled Guarantee of Religious Liberty. The exercise and enjoyment of religious faith and worship shall forever be guaranteed, and no person shall be denied any civil or political right, privilege, or capacity on account of his religious opinions. And then we go to Section 19. It says, it is ordained by the state of Idaho that perfect toleration of religious sentiment shall be secured, and no inhabitant of said state shall ever be molested in person or property on account of his or her mode of religious worship. So, I mean, these are very protected, this is a very protected right to be able to assemble, to be able to worship,
So
right?
what bypasses that? State of emergency, or how do you even, like, remedy that, like, after the fact? Like, they had
So-
no right to do that.
Yeah, they have no right. In fact, they
Yeah.
took an oath to both
Yes.
the Constitution and to the U.S. Constitution and to the state Constitution. These officers had to take, you
Yeah.
know, this officer also. These officers also took an oath. These officers took an oath. They took an oath to the Constitution, and all of these are protected
So what's
rights.
the excuse? I mean, how do they get away
Okay.
with it? Like,
Yeah.
You're right on track. So why are they acting this way?
Cause they can.
Cause they're liberals.
They can, right? He told us here.
Real quick,
But they are following, and oh, by the way, they did go in and raid that business, began prosecuting the owners.
But shouldn't
sure.
our attorney general say, wait a minute, this is against the law?
Should've, but this is the thing is they all said that they are obeying this man's order.
I know.
That's what they said. They all said that what we're doing is we've been ordered,
yeah.
we're enforcing this man's order. But why have they been required to take an oath to the constitutions?
Formula, preventatively.
What's that?
It's what they do.
Well, that's what
That
they
doesn't
do,
mean
you're
they're
right.
serious about
But
it.
what was the intent of them taking, like why in the Idaho Constitution and the US Constitution does it say that they have to take an oath to the Constitution? You're right, it's become a formality, there's no doubt about that. But it was so that they would put this before this.
Yeah.
That they would put the Constitution and take an oath. They didn't take an oath to obey Governor Little.
Not to a
They
person.
took an oath, because they knew, our founders knew that at some point, many times, that a leader's orders, or a governor, or a president's orders, or even a superior officer's orders, would violate what's in the Constitution. And they do take an oath to put the Constitution first. But they're not, right? And but you have to, point to this man, because you have to say, look, he's the one that made these orders. Him and his buddies put together these orders, and he made them, and he commanded that all the law enforcement of Idaho enforce these orders. Now, we might want to ask, well, maybe things were so bad that for the health and safety of the people of Idaho, he had to do this, right?
Yeah, maybe for the first month, when we
Okay,
didn't know.
let's answer that question. Let's just try to give Governor a little bit of a slack, okay? But I want to ask, because who remembers when we were put in the state of emergency?
Was it March? March 13th.
March 13th, that's correct. Well, that just so happened to be the very same day that President Trump announced a $50 billion federal package would be available for states that were in emergency status. Okay, well, let's explore that, that's a pretty strong coincidence, right? Right, that the very same day that we were put in a state of emergency is the same day that $50 billion became available to states that were in a state of emergency. Well, but maybe we really were in a state of emergency. The problem is, on the governor's own website on March 13th, I know some of you might not be able to see that, he says that there's only one confirmed COVID case. So we had one confirmed COVID case out of almost a state of 1.8 million people, and the federal government releases $50 billion for states that are only in a state of emergency, and Governor Little puts us in a state of emergency. For one case. One case.
$50 billion.
Yeah, it wasn't just one case.
So this is an enemy trying to get us hooked up to the federal government where we can't get loose.
So now, let's keep talking about this, because that's not all. So then what did he do a few days later? Do you remember? He put us in extreme state of emergency. Okay? And that was on what day? March 25th. Okay? On March 25th, he put us in extreme state of emergency. Well, it just so happened to be on March 25th, that was the same day that Trump and Pelosi announced that there was going to be a $2 trillion relief package for states that were in an extreme state of emergency. Extreme state. Okay? So, interesting, right? He puts us in extreme state of emergency. And at that point, we had 136 unconfirmed cases. Okay, 136, no deaths, no nothing. We didn't even, we were supposed to not even known about it. And in fact, kind of as a side note, who's here familiar with hydroxychloroquine? Pretty much all of you. Well, did you know that Governor Little was the first governor in all the states to make hydroxychloroquine illegal to be used for COVID? He actually issued it down through the board, the health board, and made it illegal for doctors to prescribe hydroxychloroquine for COVID-related issues.
Naive and stupid question. What happened to all that money? Because COVID continued to, people continued, including me.
Yeah.
Everybody had COVID, so what happened to all that money?
Scheme.
Well, he's still using it, and I'm going to answer that. Well, and I don't know, I can't answer fully but I'll give you some examples of what he's done with it. So just give me a little bit of time. That's a great question, right? So we see here that there's only 136 cases. Now, let's look. He starts to tell us why he's doing this, right? In his own orders, in his own proclamations. He says right here, and securing millions of dollars in funds. I put the state of Idaho in a state of declared a state of emergency. President Trump proclaimed that basically that we're going to have lots of funds and so forth. And then right down here, it says section 46601. Remember that. Okay, put that in the back of your mind. It's an Idaho code 46601. Here he's thanking President Trump for $1.25 billion. He's looking for more. Looks like they're going to get more. And then this is a really interesting. This is Executive Order 2020-07. And it says, whereas I issued a proclamation on March 13th, 2020, declaring a state of emergency in the state of Idaho. Whereas I issued a proclamation on March 25th, declaring a state of extreme emergency in the state of Idaho. Whereas Congress has passed and President Trump has signed 3 legislative packages that provide state funding in response to COVID-19. Whereas I anticipate additional congressional action on federal relief packages to the states regarding COVID-19. So he's telling us about what he's doing, right? Then he says, now therefore, I, Brad Little, governor of the state of Idaho, do hereby order the creation of a COVID-19 Financial Advisory Committee comprised of members appointed by and serving at the pleasure of the governor. So he says, I'm going to create a committee,
Have a team.
right? They're my buddies. I'm going to get them together, and I get to appoint them to this committee, and they serve at my pleasure.
That's where the money.
Right? And then he says here, for the coronavirus relief funds and other funds to be administered by the office of the governor. So he says, all these funds are going to come to the governor, and I'm going to get my buddies, and we're going to create a little committee here, and they serve me at my pleasure. And then we get to decide how this money is going to be spent.
Well, he wasn't intentionally honest about a lot of things.
Well, yeah, I mean, he did put it in here, right?
Well,
So, but how are funds supposed to be spent in Idaho?
Well, on the Department of Health and Welfare, because I was trying to figure out who was on this committee, and there are only one elected official, and the other, I think 11 are all appointed by the governor. So we have people running all this stuff, and they're not even elected.
Well, even the elected official was elected for another purpose, and then he put him on the committee.
Yeah, and I
So
don't
he's
even
not-
think So I'm like, we're being run by bureaucrats.
There is nobody on the committee that was elected for this committee. He appointed them all, and he even says that they serve at his pleasure. Now, how are the funds of the state supposed to be administered? Yeah, they're supposed to be administered by the legislature. Why? Why are the state funds supposed to be administered by the legislature?
People.
Balance of power.
Yeah, for about all of that. There are representatives. We elect local representatives. We send them up to the legislature, to Capitol, and they decide all together. They all have to agree upon it and decide how the funds of the state are going to be spent. And we do that so that a small group of people don't control it, become very corrupted, and get a whole bunch of power, right? That's our form of government. It's representative government where the power is distributed. And yet, we have a situation here where they have consolidated a lot of power. And how much money are we talking about? $18 billion. Over 2 times the annual state budget.
Okay, so where was our legislature? Did anybody complain? Or again, is this bypassed because of is there anything that gives them?
Yeah, absolutely. The legislature could have ended the emergency order at any time.
So that's why.
And they also should have, be screaming about the governor spending these funds without the legislature's oversight.
Yes.
Without the legislature administering them. But see, he's bypassed the legislature. And the legislature is so weak here in Idaho that they won't even stand up. And so he has basically consolidated these powers that are supposed to be among our legislatures and our representatives to make sure that they don't get abused. And that's what's happened. Now that's not all that happened, because you remember I told you that code 46601? Well, the title of that is Militia and Military Affairs. Chapter 6 is Martial Law and Active Duty. And if you go down to section 2, it says, during a period of a state of extreme emergency, the governor shall have complete authority over all agencies of the state government, including all separate boards and commissions, and the right to exercise within the area of the region, which is the state, all policing power vested in the state. So what did he do there? So he just consolidated all the money, right? Then what did he just do with the state government?
To control it.
He just, and it's not my words, I'm not using this to cite. He says, the governor shall have complete authority over all agencies of the state government, including all separate boards and commissions, and all policing power vested in the state.
So isn't the state of extreme emergency defined objectively? Like, how could he just say, oh, I think I'm gonna
It
do
does,
this?
it's right up here. If you go to state of emergency means the duly proclaimed existence and condition of extreme peril to the safety of persons and property within the state.
He declared it.
COVID.
Yeah,
But he declared it,
Yeah,
right? He declared it.
but the facts wouldn't support that.
No, I don't believe they would either.
Has that ever happened before in Idaho?
No, this has never been,
I've never heard
this
of it
has
before.
never been used, ever been used.
Well, and I'm pretty
Okay.
sure like don't you think every governor did this?
No.
No? I know.
There was a few that did not,
Only because,
There was a
we're
few that
talking
did
money.
not.
Yeah.
but remember, he didn't do this because of the extreme peril of the state.
No.
We just proved that. He only had,
Yeah.
we only had one case, then we only had 136, and never by any pandemic statistics has Idaho ever qualified for a pandemic, right? Even today, even right now.
We still don't.
What I would like to know is who was behind the information given to him about hydroxychloroquine, because
Right.
that was the nail in the coffin.
And that happened on March 19th,
Yeah, that's
2020.
I mean, they had to have known withholding that would make that death count go up.
Oh, now you're
And
a
that's-
conspiracy theorist.
I know, but why else would you
No,
call
I
it?
know. How-
Wasn't that what they said, that
They were-
high doses could kill people, so we don't want them playing around with that?
Yeah, they were saying clear, this was in March 2020, like, we were supposed to know nothing about it. They were still calling it the novel coronavirus.
Yeah.
They didn't even call it COVID-19, remember? I mean, they started calling it right about that time. But they were supposed to have known nothing about it, right? And here, on March 19th, in between the state of emergency and the extreme state of emergency, because that was on the 13th and then the 25th, right in the middle, he outlaws the use of hydroxychloroquine.
But if he says that nobody knows what it was about, how can he determine what would cure it or not?
Yeah, I know.
Well, because in
That's-
December,
this whole thing
President
was
Trump
warped.
said hydroxychloroquine. In December, he came out and said that and it was shut down right away.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
besides,
Started
in
before that.
in a state of emergency, what you want is to stop the illness. So you go to every, given opportunity.
Well,
Yeah.
where's
You
right
don't
to
just
try?
try it
Vitamin
to
D,
Right to try.
take your zinc and preventative.
So, I don't believe Brad Little is, who's directing Brad Little on this? I know
yes.
IACI runs him, and they're the big corporate businesses of Idaho, but are they tied in with the evil demonic
So
big pharma that's trying to kill everybody here?
Yes.
Because I don't think they got a gun to
This is
and
coordinated,
how
yeah.
can, my question is, how will the future governor prevent that from happening? Because we the people don't know. And
Well-
how are you protected as our next governor from the gun being held to your head? I know it's happened before and you're strong, you can fight it, but we certainly don't want that to happen. We want the exposure on the state level and the federal level.
remember,
And
he's highly motivated. Governor Little's been put in place by the bureaucrats. That's basically, who are the bureaucrats? Well, they're the full-time government employees. And we got IACI, we've got, but basically, he's put in there. And he is their hero. He just secured $18 billion and now is distributing it throughout the bureaucracies, and he literally is their hero. He was able to accomplish something that no other governor has been able to accomplish. But he had to do these things. And all the governors, not all of them, but most of them you saw, especially we could predict in 2020 exactly what Governor Little was going to do, because Governor Inslee did it just a few days before.
Right.
he does exactly what Inslee
And
does.
that's exactly what, and Newsom would do it, Brown would do it. They were all following each other.
Well, and if you
And-
remember, the state of emergency happened the night after Rachel Maddow from CNN attacked our governor for
Yeah.
not putting us in a state of emergency.
Yeah. Well, we also know that Governor Little and on all these other governors are part of the Governors Association. And they all meet, and I don't know if that's where it came from, but there definitely was a collective message that was sent out and followed by all the governors. It's just obvious.
So, Mr. Bundy, how are you going to resist that, fight that, and what chances do you have of actually, succeeding?
Opposition is.
So,
I understand it must be a
Uh-huh.
terrible pressure. I understand also that you have the stamina to fight it, but what are the chances that you might succeed?
well, so right off the bat, we're not gonna succeed unless someone's gonna fight it. Okay, so I mean, if you're just, and that's part of my message, like, look, whoever you put in as governor, they have to be a fighter. Otherwise, nothing's going to happen, right? Now the success, because we know President Trump went in there and, I mean, they just fought him. And who fought him? The bureaucrats fought him. His own, staff and team fought him, right? Because what do they want? They don't want minimized government. They don't want less spending. That doesn't benefit them. They don't want those things. And so knowing and understanding that the battle for me as a governor will be to fight the bureaucracies of the state of Idaho. And they understand and know that the governor is supposed to be the one to curb them.
Yes. Right?
The abuses are coming from the executive bureaucracies in the state and on a federal level. Yeah. And so there is no we can't give ourselves some illusion that it's not going to be a fight. It's going to be the worst fight that has ever happened in Idaho.
So can I interrupt you briefly, because I want to sit here and point something out that I think is probably more important than all of this right now, and it's called unity. You pointed it out right away in the beginning with what you did, Aaron, down in your family, and that is what pushed back those the federal. Now you look up in Canada, they don't have a single gun basically. And the only people that probably know about it are those of us who actually don't watch mainstream media and what's actually happening. I'm disappointed that the United States wasn't the first to do it. We've become soft.
With Biden in the White House.
Well,
Biden's not the problem.
He's not we are the problem.
Yes,
we as a collective community are the problem.
And they came out at 20 to 30 degrees below zero.
And they're still fighting.
With their families.
And it's amazing. And they're fighting with peace. They're peaceful.
Yes.
They're amazing. And now looking at what's going on. So my point that I'm getting at is your family were able to create a unity and a community to come together on horseback. Now looking here, how can you create a community of unity? Because the reality is exposure, yes, but it's gonna have to be from the people. And we're gonna have, and as the people, how can you bring unity to our state?
That's not the first time I've done that. That's not the first time that I've had to do this. I've done that multiple times, where I've unified, tens of thousands of people for the protection of an individual or family's rights. I've done it many, many times. And you're right, that is what will solve the problem. Especially, imagine having the influence of a governor, and then also the support of the people, or at least a large, body of people, active people. Imagine what a governor can do in that scenario.
Can you fire anybody?
Absolutely.
All those happy bureaucrats.
That's
They
exactly
came from
right.
Washington.
So people ask, well, why don't you run for Senate, or why don't you? Well, because none of that is going to solve the problem. I mean, I'll just end up, wasting my time and getting so disgusted with it that I don't want anything to do with it. The governor has the power to control, at least in theory still, right? At least in idea, has the power to minimize, to appoint new heads of bureaucracies, to fire people, to downsize the size of the bureaucracies, to even eliminate it, to even control how much funding goes. Not as the legislature, legislates, and the governor can then say, look, in the bureaucracies is how we're going to spend this money for this, right? So there's a tremendous amount of power in the governor's hands to be able to minimize where the abuses and the usurpations are coming from. And that's why I'm going as governor. But it will be a fight, because as soon as you want to minimize an agency, well, guess who's going to fight like crazy? It will fight like, but that's the battle that's going to take place. And if the governor could be there at the top with a good amount of support from the people, then we can accomplish these things. And I've said it multiple times. I could go into the office of the governor here in Idaho for 4 to 8 years and never, ever legislate one law. I could close the doors to the legislature and just focus, I could just focus on the minimizing the powers and abuses of the executive bureaucracies. That's all I do for 4 to 8 years. Never even legislate a law. And I could do the people of Idaho a tremendous amount of good.
Because it strikes me that the problem is the same as it's always been. we have a bunch of people that see what needs to be done, but nobody will actually do it. Or worse, they'll pop up and say, hey, we can't do that, it's, you know, I don't think it's legal. Well, the problem is, the opposition is doing everything, and it's legal until they actually get into court and make it illegal.
Yeah. And I fought that battle. That's what I've been doing the last decade. That's all I've been doing. And life hasn't been that great, but I am willing to fight a little longer. If the people of Idaho want to give me that chance, I will go and fight a little longer. I'll go fight for another 4 to 8 years. And I believe that we can create a refuge here in Idaho and a standard that the rest of the world could look to as a place of liberty and prosperity and even peace and tranquility that could happen right here in Idaho. And I believe it must happen. And so, you know, ultimately, you know, with everything being said, I mean, we can talk about some of the things that I hope to get done. But above all of that, it is stripping the bureaucracies of their power, pushing them back to the legislature, back to the people, so the people can be free the way that we were intended. So
well, maybe that is what is going to inspire the people to fight along you. They're going to see that it's not empty promises as usual. And once they see you actually, you know, kicking butt all around, they're going to say, okay, well, yeah, he means business.
Yeah.
Because the prevailing sentiment these days is, oh, what the devil am I going to vote for? You know, it's always the same thing, it's always the same promises, and we're always stuck in the same place.
I think you're right. I hope that does inspire people. I think it has. I think that's why we, you know, I've never been in politics before. We've run for the last, 8 months. Well, and we have, I mean, we see it because we're hyper focused on it, right? But when we first came out, we set a narrative. We had the Keep Idaho plan, and we said, this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it. And now every candidate, except Little, because he doesn't say anything, every candidate in the race is saying the same things we're saying. We're controlling, which is fine, because the greatest compliment is plagiarism, right? So, but the thing is that's how we are controlling the narrative. And we will continue to do that. And, you know, I just ask people to, well, look at my history and to see if I'm going to just be someone that's just saying things out the side of my mouth, or if I'm actually going to act. I will act. I don't even know how to do anything differently. That's just what I do.
Sorry. I was just gonna ask if you would be willing to take a few down in the dirt questions concerning the Keep Idaho plan.
Absolutely.
You got a bunch of stuff that I like, but I got a few questions.
Okay.
You're talking about a consumption tax as opposed to all the hideous stuff that we've got up there now. The only two consumption taxes that I know of are the not beloved sales tax, and more importantly, and more scary, the value-added tax that our European friends love so much. Are you talking about a VAT for Idaho?
No.
Good.
No. So let me explain. So a consumption tax, you know, there's other terms for it, sales tax, a transfer tax, so forth, so on and so forth. So let me break this down, because I'm talking about just for property, okay? We could talk about the need or not need for sales tax on other things. But right now we have an issue because we don't own our homes. We don't really own our homes. You know, the state requires us to annually pay a tax on it, and if we don't pay it or can't pay it, then they take our homes away. And we have to pay that until the day we die. And people every day in Idaho are losing their homes. It's typically the elderly, but it's also those that might lose their job for a period of time or are disabled. They're losing their homes. And property is extremely, extremely important. And in fact, it's so important, it is the #1 thing that communists will attack. Karl Marx said in the Communist Manifesto that, or at least a statement that he said, that communism can be summed up into one sentence: the abolition of private property. And our current property tax system is a mechanism in which the state can take our property. They could price us out of owning, all of us owning our homes. And in fact, that's a lot of what is happening right now. So anyhow, I feel it extremely important that we sure up private property in Idaho, that we make it so that the state can't leverage it. So I'm proposing the elimination of the property tax system to replace it with a consumption tax on property. So let me explain. So our current system right now, if you have a home that's $400,000, which is the average home in Idaho, cost of the average home in Idaho, it's a little over 400,000. In the cities here, it's 550,000 is the average home. But so the average person right now, under that $400,000, even though it's rising, would pay $2,000 to $3,000 a year. Over a 30-year period, that would be $60,000 to $90,000 that the state or the county would collect for that home. Now we know it varies and so forth, but that's just using raw math. That's what it would be. And the problem, again, is we never own our homes. We pay on it until we die. So I'm proposing the replacement of our property tax system with a consumption tax. And let's take this same $400,000 home. And we would, just for easy math, let's say 5%, there would be a tax the purchaser would pay at the time of the purchase. So let's say 5%. It could be less, and it would definitely need to be capped, but let's say 5%. So for easy math, that'd be $20,000. That could be paid at the time, or it could be rolled into the mortgage, but the mortgage company would pay it. But after the transfer of this property, the state no longer has any interest in it. And they're paid off. They no longer have any interest. You might be saying, well, 20,000 is a long shot from the 60 to 90,000 that I showed you earlier. But you have to calculate that the average home sells 3 to 5 times in the state of Idaho over a 30-year period, which would mean that it would calculate to $60,000 to $100,000 going to the county or to replace the property tax. What's the difference? You own your home. You know, it's done. It's a one-time thing. It's done. There are some benefits. There's one negative to it, and that is if you that $20,000, if you roll it into the mortgage, you would have to pay interest on it. So that's a negative. To me, well worth it to own my own home.
Yeah.
But there's some benefits too on a county level, because the county, like say there's an area that was developed and all those properties were sold. Well, the county would receive that money up front to pay for roads, infrastructure, underground, all those things. Because right now what they're doing is they're going to get bonds. They're paying it on 30 to 50 years at a certain interest. It's usually not that high, but it's still an interest with that long of loan. It calculates to quite a bit of money. And this way the county can, develop and use these funds to develop and wouldn't have to loan and borrow money. And so that's what when I talk about replacing property tax with a consumption tax on property, that's what I'm talking about.
So where do you stand on things like special area taxes? I live in southeast Boise and over towards Barber Park and in Harris Ranch, and they've got themselves one heck of a scheme going on over there. They basically got together, the rancher, the developer, and the city, and they created a special taxing district, and then they basically gave the people who actually bought the homes zero say in how this thing works. And they can every time the developer wants to do something in that geographic area, we get stuck with the bill because he's out there selling bonds. The city's selling bonds, so they love it, and the taxpayers get to pay extra. Your $3,000 to $5,000 that you talked about for a $400,000 house, closer to $5,500 or $6,000 a year in that area.
Yeah. Well, the power tax,
California,
and it never goes away.
Yeah. Well, in my freedom-loving mind, I hate taxes, all taxes, right? And I really would like to explore the possibility of getting rid of all taxes. Yeah. We have some legitimate purposes of government, like our sheriffs, that are there to supposed to be there to protect the rights of the people. I like that we have a place to go document our rights, the county clerk and the county, you know, those services, that we can go and they can hold our deeds and they can keep track of boundaries and so forth. And all of that costs money. I don't think near amount of money, the amount of money that they take in. But, so this right here is basically me saying, look, there are some legitimate purposes to government and we need to fund it. I believe this is the way to fund it, not the way they've been funding it. And then we also need to explore, I mean, constantly, how we minimize the tax burden of the people. And, I mean, I'm completely against that. Did they do that through the HOA? Was it contractual?
No. This was before they developed and before they even put in built a single house or put in a single road. They simply passed this structure whereby the developer gets to submit bills for his development costs, like roads, sewers. He gets
Who administers it?
It is done through something called the Harris Ranch CID, and it is associated. It's basically three partners. It's the Harris family, the developers themselves, people that are doing the work out there, and the city. And they're all happy as hell with it because the money keeps rolling in.
It sounds. Has anybody challenged it?
We're trying to.
Yeah, because it is.
Because it's expensive as hell. The city's got unlimited money, hours to spend defending themselves.
Well, they've just found a way to, you know, extract the people, and I mean, I don't need to tell you that, but it sounds like a big mess, a big scam, yeah.
And it's also, I mean, it flies into the face of a whole bunch of written regulations that the city and the state had. They just basically bypassed them all. I hope nobody would notice.
Right.
So that's, I got two other questions
Okay,
similar. I like the idea that you're against civil asset forfeiture, and you're talking about ending that. I don't know how big a problem that is in Idaho, but it's god awful in a lot of the rest of the country.
It's very significant here as well. We have because Idaho, and you know, I speak a little bit lightly, but hopefully you will understand my intent. Because Idaho is so Republican and we're so blue line that it has given our policing agencies a lot of you know, excess capital to, maybe I shouldn't use capital in this term, but just a lot of ability to kind of push the line when it comes to the overstepping of rights, if you will. And because of that, then that belief that we have of really being strong police and blue line and so forth, we also see a lot of asset forfeiture, and we also see a lot of arrests. And in fact, the United States incarcerates more people than any other country in the world by 3 times. And Idaho,
Congress is out.
what's that? Yeah, and Idaho incarcerates more people than any other state per capita. So we in Idaho incarcerate more people than anywhere in the world. In Idaho, yeah, I didn't show you the statistics. And it's because we always back the blue, always, no matter whether they're right or whether they're wrong. We always back them, no matter what, and that gives them a lot of leniency to do asset forfeiture and so forth. Yeah, which is just
stealing.
Like, it's stealing because constitutionally they are not supposed to take property without due process, and yet asset forfeitures, they literally could just take the property because you had it with you when you were arrested, or even for example, if you have $10,000 worth of cash and you're just traveling with it, and they see you have it, they could take it, and you can never get it. They may never give it back to you. They can quote unquote legally just take it and never give it back. And you might be completely legitimate. You may, hopefully you earned it. It's yours, but just because you had that amount.
Yeah, so, okay, so this whole thing when it comes to the police, I'm learning about that. So wouldn't you say that like maybe at least 80% of our police are good and maybe we just have a few rogue ones? Because this is where I kind of, getting a little nervous.
Yeah, well, I think if we want to believe those numbers, yeah. I mean, I
I don't know what they are,
I don't know what they are either. I don't know what they are. My experience has been that almost all of them will just obey an order. Yeah, they might be nice guys, they might be good neighbors, they might be raising good families, but they took an oath to the Constitution, and no matter what, they always obey the order rather than stand up for the
Is that 'cause
Constitution.
they're not educated about the
So,
Constitution?
I know you have one more question, but I'm gonna capitalize on this
Go
right
for
here,
it.
because
You've gone strong.
one of the things that I have, and it's in my Keep Idaho plan, that I plan to do to help our situation with our officers and also help the officers,
Yes.
is that I plan on backing up an officer using the state's resources as a governor, backing up an officer who says to a superior, I will not do that because it's a violation of the Constitution. So when they say, look, I'm not gonna arrest those people going to church, it's a violation, and then that officer wants to reprimand or fire or put him on discipline, he can appeal to the state, and hopefully we get a good state general attorney, and if not, the office of the governor will back up that officer.
Oh, that's great.
And say, look, that officer, he made an oath. If he believes he is obeying that oath, then and he has evidence that he is, then we will back him up. And what will that do? That will give all the officers across Idaho the strength to say no to a superior when it's contrary to the Constitution. It will make a huge difference in this dangerous kind of kind of this middle ground that we find ourselves in between rights and a police state. It'll just solve a lot of that problem just simply by them knowing that the state will back them up for standing according to their oath of office. So, yeah.
Well, thank you.
I beg leniency. It's not that I want to hog the microphone, but I have to be somewhere else in a minute. So, therefore, I want to ask you if it's. I'm sorry, I got this from the internet. There's a lot of good things and a lot of BS as well. But anyway, I read this and I was a bit troubled. According to the internet, you expressed your support for Black Lives Matter and for defund the police movements. In July 2020, you allegedly said, you must have a problem in your mind if you think that somehow the Black Lives Matter is more dangerous than the police. There needs to be a defunding of government in general, I agree with that, and especially the police, I don't agree with that, because they're the ones who actually are going to seek destruction. Did you actually say that?
I think I did say that. So
You really do believe that Black Lives Matter are less dangerous than the police?
Absolutely. Now let me explain myself.
Please
and
do.
I believe that you do too.
What?
This will be entertaining.
If Black Lives Matter come to my door, like say they were rallying, come to my door to hurt or take my children or my wife or me and hurt me or whatever, I have no problem blowing them away at my front door. I can defend myself against them. But if a bunch of police come, for whatever reason, all of a sudden now, guess what? If I even act in any way to defend myself, I'm prosecuted and put in prison for 10, 20, 15 years. Or they just shoot me. So in nobody's mind, you must think that an organization like Black Lives Matter is more dangerous than an out of control policing agency or police force. It's just simply not. And so I stand by those words.
But I think that is sort of generalizing a bit in the sense that the police are always, as with your plan, to teach the police to support them, which I totally am in favor of. You can't do that with Black Lives Matter. Because nobody polices them.
But
and if you are talking about defunding the police, you know what comes after. They are going to put their police.
Just to make things clear, when I made that statement, it was before the defund the policing became coined, and so now people grab it and act like it was something that was, because you remember when Black Lives Matter later then said defund the police, But what,
Basically, you invented the phrase and they took it over.
well,
and you
I
now
don't know if I
associate
did
with
or
it.
not, but the thing is Congress has power to do what to the bureaucracy? Why did our founders give Congress or the legislature power over the purse? Why?
Defunding.
That's right, to defend. When an agency gets out of control, it doesn't matter if it's a policing agency or if it's any other agency. The power was given to the legislature and to the Congress, which is, on a federal level, to defund them. And even though that's been a key word that's got very unpopular, it is the purpose, one of the purposes and powers of checks and balances, to minimize. And one of the things we do not want to allow to happen is our policing agencies to be overfunded, overstaffed, overpowered. We do not want that, because they can become and have historically been and let's look at any situation where rights have been, let's look at, Russia, let's look at China, let's look at Germany. Every one of those were done by the officers of those in power, right? It wasn't done by fringe groups like Black Lives Matter.
The FBI. I understand that, but then we have to sort of go from theory to practice, and by that I mean, with the government that is in place now, they have zero interest in defending the people. They have only interest in defending themselves, their agenda.
That's why I'm afraid of their office.
Yeah,
The FBI.
Yes.
The CIA.
I'm not talking about the
state
FBI.
police.
Yes, I
ATF.
understand that, but
ATF.
there's
They're the
another
dangerous
thing.
ones.
Yes, but which is more dangerous? Look at the way.
Black Lives Matter or ATF? I would take Black Lives Matter
But-
any day of the
But
week.
you have an
I would not.
ideology that is moving up through the ranks, and we don't want that,
What do you mean by,
I think like the
People
Black
don't
Lives
understand.
Matter ideology, CRT, all that stuff that is
Okay, so
moving up and
don't in any
taking
way
over.
think, like I have stood and
I get you,
risked my
yeah.
entire life fighting against these
Those
socialist, communist
Yeah.
principles that are the foundation of Black Lives Matter.
I mean, it was a statement you made, and hopefully that.
It's a true statement though. And I stand
get
by that. It is a
but
true statement. I would much rather in any day of the week have
Today-
200
today,
Black
but
Lives
maybe
Matter
10 years from now.
protesters or even violent men at my front door than even 2 officers.
What about the
That
people
want
who
to
don't
take-
have the way to defend themselves from Black Lives Matter?
Why don't they have a way to defend themselves? Because the police took it?
No,
Because of some city-
not
city-
necessarily,
they don't
because
like
some
them.
people do not believe, rightly or wrongly, do not believe in having weapons in their houses. Now,
Then,
no, wait a moment.
okay.
We can say, I think it's idiotic, but there are people like that, and there are people who think differently from us.
And there are,
So those people need somebody to be
But those
ready
people
to
have freedom
protect
of
them.
speech also.
They have
So,
freedom.
okay, I mean,
If they
so
break
I'm-
a law, then the law has to be
You know,
enforced.
can I just,
Yeah.
okay, on the
That's a radical
funding,
idea.
I was concerned too about what it sounds like, cause automatically our brains, oh, defund the police, but when I looked at your video, what I thought you were saying was the federally funding police, because then you have to agree to what the federal wants to do, so was that more the
Well,
funding you
that
were
was
talking
part
about?
of it, that was part of it, but I mean, I stand on it. No one has been able to show me or a group of people, when they make that statement, how ultimately that statement is incorrect. And I know it might sound bad, it might look bad, whatever, but when you boil it all down, and I even in the circumstance where you've got, I mean, when you compare the two, the danger of the two, historically, whether you're talking about a fringe organization of, basically violent people, or you're talking about an out of control policing agency controlled by, wicked people and they're obeying their orders. This one is always more dangerous, has always done more damage, has always caused more destruction, more lives. I mean, in the 21st century alone, anywhere from 180 to 250 million people were killed by their own government. And who pulled the trigger? It was the officers.
But Alan,
Right.
can I,
sorry.
May I interject in
Sure.
this? Because where it comes in with the feeling that I get from this is like what they're doing with the defunding the police in like Minneapolis. And it basically comes through the premise of, let's defund the police so that we can take the money and give it to the social groups, because if we do the social stuff, we can solve all the problems. In that, I'm sorry, I cannot get.
Yeah, I don't
I
either,
think
because,
you just- yeah.
because what they want, this is what they want by defunding the police in that way. They want no police so that they can create anarchy, so that they can steal and loot and all of those things.
But that's
But in
why-
no way, that's not in no way what I
But that's
said.
where I think you have to do that distinction.
No, I think you guys have to, I know exactly where I'm at.
Well, no, but I
You
mean,
need to do that,
I
not
know,
me.
but when you're talking.
I know exactly where I'm at. There's a difference between, look, we give Congress the power to defund, but we don't say, oh, Congress, now you're defunding using that power. You can't do that because Black Lives